After 9/11, a climate of fear was created in order to shut down any opposition to the Bush administration's new agenda. A week after 9/11, anthrax began appearing in the mail. The letters were made to look as though they were the work of Muslim extremists, claiming, "Death to America," and "Allah is great."
Now, if you remember, these anthrax letters, they were written to appear to be from semi-literate Muslims, very crude handwriting, all of this, all of that. They really do look more like movie prop letters than real letters.
The targets were government buildings, media outlets such as CBS, NBC, the New York Post, and politicians such as Senator Daschle and Leahy, two members of the opposition party. When the FBI tested the anthrax, it was highly refined and weaponized. Colin Powell would go on CNN and deny these allegations.
No, I think we've had a lot of stories over the past 4 or 5 days. First it was weaponized anthrax, then it was highly refined, and then when it was analyzed, it was discovered it was none of the above.
The anthrax used in the attacks was identical to that of the Ames strain, which led the investigation to Fort Detrick.
An analysis of the anthrax that was sent to Senator Daschle's office shows that this anthrax has a sophistication that leads people to know that it can only be produced by a PhD microbiologist, and it would have to have been done in a small, well-equipped microbiology lab.
This appears to be the so-called Ames strain. That was a strain of anthrax that was first isolated almost 50 years ago at a U.S. Department of Agriculture diagnostic lab in Ames, Iowa. What's uncommon about this is that it has been engineered in such a way to be, as they say, readily aerosolized. That means, in effect, that what somebody has done is taken the anthrax spores, added to them some kind of a chemical to get in the way of a normal electrostatic process that causes the spores to clump together. Chemical's been added to declump them, in effect. That makes them very fine. They are able then to be dispersed very readily into the air.
The Washington Post would report, genetic fingerprinting studies indicate that the anthrax spores mailed to Capitol Hill are identical to stocks of the deadly bacteria maintained by the U.S. Army since 1980. Those labs can trace back their samples to a single military source, the U.S. Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases at Fort Detrick, Maryland. It's been made quite clear that Al-Qaeda wasn't behind this. It is a specialized biological weapon only produced by our military in one facility. High-level FBI and CIA officials said none of the 60 to 80 daily threat reports from intelligence sources contain evidence linking the anthrax attacks to Osama bin Laden's terrorist network. This did not stop the mainstream press from trying to blame Al-Qaeda.
As investigators race to find answers to the recent wave of anthrax terror, we'll look at what investigators are targeting now.
Since September 11th, Americans have been put on alert.
This is so terrible.
Investigators are trying to ward off more attacks by dissecting the terrorist plan for September 11th, looking for patterns, methods, associates that could reveal what else terrorists had in mind.
It was not something smuggled in from Iraq. It was not something smuggled in from any Middle Eastern country. It was U.S. government ultrafine granulated weaponized anthrax spores. There was another story that the media absolutely would not touch, the story of Dr. Philip Zach. And it goes back to the U.S. government lab where the anthrax was stored. It was reported that official U.S. government documents in the anthrax investigation showed that Dr. Zach had entered the laboratory where the anthrax used in the letters was kept without proper authorization after having lost his job.
Somehow the Bush administration would have the foresight to be on Cipro 6 weeks prior to the attacks. How convenient. An attack traced back to U.S. government facilities, and the president and his staff happen to be taking the antidote before it's even in the mail. Judicial Watch would file suit against the administration for its actions.
Well, this is another good example of how certain people consider themselves to be above the rest of us. On September 11th, I think it'll come as a shock to a lot of people, but it's been reported by the New York Times and other major news organizations and confirmed by the White House. The President's office and Vice President's office went on Cipro, the antibiotic that was used to combat anthrax. The White House went on Cipro. It must have known that either an attack was underway or was imminent. It shows you that some people in this country are less than equal and are not treated like the political elites.